Hello and welcome to History Through Fiction, the podcast. I'm your host, Colin Mustful, and today I'm delighted to be joined by Vanessa Riley, author of Fire, Sword, and Sea. Vanessa, welcome.
Thank you, Colin. It's always so much fun to be here with you.
Well, let's start with the time and place. It's 1675. Where are we and what is going on in this part of the world?
Okay, so in 1675, and I say the 1600s are insane in general, but we are at the advent of colonization of the Caribbean. Uh, People have figured out that there are resources on all the various islands. But there's two world powers right now, and it's not the people you usually think of. Well, you might think of Spain with the grand armadas and having so much gold, but it's also the Muslim empire called the Mughals. And in every other country, Britain, France, Portugal, they are all using piracy against these two forces to gain more in the world. So to be a world power, you're developing a navy, but if you don't have a navy, you hire privateers. And so this is a world where piracy is legal. And with this legal construct, how do you make money? How do you survive? All the rules that we think about are somewhat rewritten. So it's chaos. The church is in chaos. All these islands are like, particularly Tortuga, where our heroine begins her journey. It's sometimes it's a French colony, sometimes it's a Spanish colony. Right now, I think it's actually split, so that half of this tiny little island of Tortuga, half is Spanish, half is French, and then you have a place called Basse-Terre, which is a pirate haven. So you've got everyone coming, division in the land, and piracy just running rampant.
Well, just hearing you describe it, it's obviously rich for storytelling. Looking 400 years back, what's the reality versus what we see on screen and in books? What did you discover in your research? Was there anything surprising about actual piracy at that time that we might not expect?
Oh, everything was insane. So everybody has this picture of Johnny Depp walking on a boat and people walking off on gangplanks into the middle of the ocean as a punishment. None of that's real. Okay. What you will actually find, which was very surprising, between 20 to 30% of your pirate crew were African or black. You would find a completely mixed crew as long as you did your job. If you were a rigger, if you were a helmsman, a navigator, as long as you could do your job, no one cared the color of your skin. And just to throw a little extra on that, you can have a completely diverse, integrated top side of the boat sitting on chattel slavery underneath. Because as pirates, you hit a Spanish armada, you've got to get rid of that gold quickly because everything is marked, everything's traced. And the universal currency at that time is slaves. So you get this dichotomy of integrated meritocracy up top and the worst of colonization, enslavement at the bottom.
Well, let's get into the book here a little bit and your heroine, Jacquote de la Haye. Where was she in this hierarchy, and who was she, and what was she involved in?
Okay. Um, with this world, women only have two roles. Doesn't matter who you are, or your birthright, etc. You have two roles. You either can be a wife, the woman making the home, etc., etc., or a wench. A wench. Yeah, this is when my southern accent actually comes out. A prostitute, a courtesan if you were a high end. This is the world. And those are, if a woman wants to have something else, have some sort of autonomy, that is unheard of. So you have to rebel against the system. So Jacquote is born. Her father is French. Her mother is Guinea. All of Africa at this moment in time is called Guinea. So her mother is Guinea, and she has a brother who she knows at some point she is going to have to take care of him. He has some sort of disability that leaves him mute for this story. So now she's in this world. It's thrusting her into, I have to be not only somebody's wife, eventually, I'm going to have to mother my own brother. And yet, even though I'm running the tavern pretty much for my father, I don't get the credit. I don't get to be looked at as exceptional. I'm just a daughter fulfilling her role, who will eventually be a wife fulfilling her role. And Jacquote, that is against everything in her being. And she will go to every length and find other women who will go to every single length so that they can write their own story, which goes against the narrative that the world is telling them they have to do.
So one of the most important things about writing historical fiction is filling in the gaps that history leaves blank, and there are plenty of them, especially as it relates to women, especially as it relates to Black women. So talk more about how you filled in the gaps for Jacquote and why that's so important.
Yeah. So I was actually literally in Jamaica, and anytime I go to Jamaica, Kingston, Jamaica to be precise, I want to soak in the history. So I go to the fort at Port Royal, what's left of it. We're taking a tour, and they take us to one of the prisons that actually held Mary Read, the famous pirate. And that's in the 1750s, 1770s. So like almost 100 years, 50 to 100 years from my time frame. And I asked the question, well, were there any Black women pirates? You know, we're in Jamaica, Black women. And we all just kind of looked around, and they'd heard of something, and they tossed a name, and you start going down this rabbit hole. But what I find more interesting is her friends, everyone who she's linked to, like Anne Devere, very well documented. Now, Anne is a French woman, so you've got birth records, you've got where she traveled to, who she married, her husband, her third husband, you know, the richest pirate of this time frame is often dealing with government, so her name is linked in these various things. Being able to document the movement of her friends, of the people she's connected to, helped fill in the dots, because you know they have to be in each other's sphere for them to be considered friends, for them to be linked together. And unfortunately, that is what you have to do a lot. You have to make an assessment of, if this person at this age, what would they be doing? Where would they be going? And if you can find connections, people who are quote unquote more famous or just more well documented, use them as a benchmark. So I find snippets of other people's lives that are intersecting with Jacquote's. I look at the history. I'm going to follow what is happening in this world. You know, the French colonization is a really big push at this time frame, and there's lots of battles, and they're often hiring pirates to be their navy for them. And then you've got the governor of Jamaica, which is farther away, about I don't want to give it the wrong number, but it's you have Tortuga, you have Saint Domingue, which is present day Haiti, then you skip a bit, and then you get to Jamaica. That governor is one of the former legendary pirates, who built his fame and his infamy from his pirate run. You connect all of these people together and where they are in their careers. The time at Jacquote is at her high peak when she becomes a pirate captain. This man the famous captain has just died. So you're able to connect from death records, from very limited newspapers. You know, Shakespeare's just standardized the English language probably about 1610, 16. We're only about, 60 years. So you've got a lot of moving parts. I try to work with like a very detailed, exhaustive timeline, and I have to know what else is going on in the world, because even though we think the world is smaller because of we have our digital communications, there are gossips, there's papers, there's sailors moving back and forth. Information is not necessarily flowing as fast as we have it, but it's flowing, and all of those things shape her world. When piracy becomes illegal, shapes her world. The movements of the church, particularly where when I know that she's going to be in Santo Domingue and other parts of Hispaniola, and we know how the church is the dominating force, you're able to look through church records and find out different things that have happened and just linking these things together. So unfortunately, it's a lot of research. Sometimes it's competing narratives, and you have to decide which narrative you think is more accurate, more believable. And then, how do I weave the best story to convey that this was a chaotic time and that there were dreamers that wanted more and really did anything they possibly could to have more.
Well, that sounds like quite a puzzle you had to put together. I can't imagine how much work that took. Um, but
I
let's
am good
move.
at three-dimensional chess.
Let's. I'm curious. After you put the puzzle together, you still have a novel here about piracy that's called Fire, Sword, and Sea. So, can you talk a little bit about the battle scenes and the romance and all the chaos and the fun parts for the readers?
Yes. This is where being a nerd really helps, right? So I literally, there's a scene in the book where they're in a canoe and it's dark and they have to look. Jacquote, I think, or Lazare has a scope, and they're looking up at this frigate. I did not want to describe this scene if you couldn't physically see the people because of the positioning of the boat. So I'm literally breaking out trigonometry and figuring out, what representation would there be? What would you see? Those kind of things. Because I'm a nerd like this, right? And, I did a lot of lunar trajectories to figure out, because they don't have GPS to guide these ships. They're looking literally at star maps and the way the sun is setting on the horizon. So it was kind of geeky. I brought a lot of math into this world, into my because I want to give you the most authentic, realistic representation. I read old battle scenes, so there are other pirates during this time frame where I reenacted some of their battle scenes because it was so well documented what happened, how they approached the boats, because there's so many pirate movies that make it extremely sensational, and there's some of that mystery that you want to capture because that's what a reader's looking for. But what is practical? Are they really taking ropes and swinging from bow to bow? So maybe, how are they actually? The guns are too slow, so it is really hand to hand combat. Sword fare, that kind of thing. And cannons are dangerous, right? Because if it backfires, you're gonna get the splinters and the blow up. But modeling actual battles really, really helped. And then you have to take into account the person writing the battle is going to give you the most heroic version of whatever happens. So you got to put little fudging into that. But I wanted it to be as realistic as possible. I'm not a big gore person, but this is a bloody time, so I sanitize as much as I can. But I hope you feel like you are part of the battle, that you are in this middle of chaos, and that you have one goal. I need to protect my crew. I need to protect my life. And we have a mission that we're going to go forward with.
Well, let's talk a little bit more about your background now. You are quite a prolific author, many historical fiction, Regency novels. Where do you feel you're at in your career? What still gives you motivation, and where do you find challenges? And just give us a little perspective where you're at as an author with everything you have going on.
Well, Fire, Sword, and Seed is book number 29. So we're plugging away here. Every book teaches you something. Every book you lose a little something. And we're at a point where a great number of people don't want to know true history. They love the senses, everything sensationalized. They love that, right? But for some reason, they think the truth makes them feel bad, even though they had nothing to do with it, even though they're not the ones pulling the trigger or raising the sword or stealing, materials and goods from villages. They, but because the new investigations into history showing the good, the bad, and the ugly upsets people. I need to think, how do we tell these stories in different ways so that the truth still gets out, but we can get through the filter. I have friends whose books are banned, right? Sometimes you can tell in just the media coverage what books have been sanctioned that we're going to have this story be put out, and which ones aren't. It's a dangerous time when you are a truth sayer. When you're a truth sayer and a storyteller, it's extremely dangerous because there are a lot of factors you have no control over. So I am sitting back, as I'm putting everything on the table, as I do pretty much with every book. Putting everything on the table to push out this story because I think it's important. I think the lives in this book, the women, their histories need to be told. But you have to look at the place we are in this world. How do you go forward in a space where truth is dangerous? Truth can get you excommunicated. Truth can get you blocked or banned. I don't know. So every day I'm looking at new media, looking at different activities, but I'm not I'm not going anywhere, and I have 100 more stories to tell. But one has to figure out what to do, how to navigate in a world that's you thought was opening up, and recognizing that, yeah, history may not always be great, but there are important lessons that we need to learn. Or, hey, look at these exciting hidden figures, secret figures that we should know about, but because of some reason or other have been left out of our history books. Let's look at this exciting thing. What can we learn? The hateful aspects of this is very disconcerting. So it's every day is a new invention, and I approach the topics that fascinate me. I'm a storyteller. I come from storytellers. I shall continue being a storyteller. But as my mama's daughter, I got to be smart. How do I get the message out in the least painful way? Life is short. Nothing is guaranteed, and sometimes you've got to ask, when you count the cost, is it worth the pain, the disappointment, to try and tell stories when there is such resistance?
I think that's such a wonderful and well thought out statement. I wonder if you can talk a little bit more about your job setting the record straight. You talked about when you look at historical battle scenes, you have to take into account, you have to be a little skeptical. And some of those accounts, they make it into like the cultural lexicon and they just grow into a story of all their own. Can you talk about how important it is for you to set the record straight? And also, I wonder if you can talk a little bit more about how you can measure success, because that is a really lofty ideal that you've expressed. Where do you find encouragement? Where do you say, yes, I am doing the right thing? This is worth it.
Yeah. So two different things. So the euphemisms are amazing. They always stun me. So I told you at the beginning of our conversation that during this time frame, anyone from Africa is called their guinea, right? I keep finding these records saying a pewter basin, 17 guineas, or we're gonna trade, trade, something, some vase or something for 5 guineas. And initially, I thought we were talking about the coin. I soon learned we were not talking about the coin. We were talking about people. We were talking about the people, the Africans, the enslaved Africans, being their value for some horrid object, and the records keeping it straight of what they would cost, what they would trade for. So once again, the euphemism is guineas because it's the gold that was taken from Guinea. Yeah, it was the gold taken from Guinea, but it was living, breathing individuals. And that just became the euphemism because we are enslaved people were the universal currency. It's, you wanted to launder money from your stolen, that you stole from the French, that you stole from the Spanish, that you stole from the Mughals, you turned it into slaves. That's a hard one to sit with. And, but it's the truth, right? It becomes a battle of how do you look at history sometimes when you see so many things have been whitewashed and then obliterated, or people look at you like you're crazy because it wasn't what they learned in history, or it wasn't on television from the movies that they're watching. There's a bigger battle going on, right? And so for me, what is success? Success is reaching readers. I love, going out to events and a reader stopping me and telling me how much they enjoyed something, or something that they learned. Some of my favorite reviews, especially in the beginning of my career, were I Googled it and she was right. That says so much, right? I'm happy you've gotten enlightenment, and I'm happy that you share this because are so stunned. But it also shows you the layers we're working with, right? The audacity that this woman has done so much research that she's going to get it right. The audacity that I would publish something that's wrong, and just under the guise of fiction. I did have a pastor once say fictions are lies, right? And I was like, it's imagination. It's not. But I get you. I get you. Nonfiction, truth, yeah, etc. It's a battle, right? And at 29 books, like I said, I've got so many stories. I've got ideas that I'm always a serial researcher. So there's like things that I'm a collector. And tell it, pro tip, if you find anything that's interesting, screenshot it. You'll never find it again. I'm gonna tell you that right now. You will never find it. There are stories I could have done. I can't find it because I was working on something else. I was like, oh, I'll be back. You will never be back. You will never remember how you found it. Screenshot it, download it, do whatever you have to do. Keep it in a file. And so I have a huge file of ideas that I would love, 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 love to do. Many, many historical fiction ideas of women and empires that I think we need to think about. But you got to look at the landscape. I'm not one for hitting my head against a wall. That is just not something I want to do. But it's figuring out the next steps. What do you do next? How do you get your message out? Because the message still needs to be told. So I am thankful. So I look at my career as a success. I got a book out, right? I got 29 of them little suckers out now. Seeing them in stores are amazing, right? But even now with inventory situations, that's not always a guarantee, even when you're traditionally published, that it'll actually make it onto a shelf. So I'm grateful for every moment I see that. I love it when fans take pictures in bookstores and send it in. Those are moments of gratitude. And that's, I think, the measuring stick now. I'd love to go further and faster, and I'd love for every single last one of my books to end up as a movie. We can still got time for that, so Hollywood.
Vanessa, this has been incredibly enlightening, and I cannot tell you just how much I admire your craft. So thank you for continuing to do that work. Before we leave here, what would you say to readers who haven't read any of your work? I mean, you have not just Fire, Sword, and Sea, but Sister, Mother, Warrior, Queen of Exiles, Island Queen. What would you say to them? Why should they pick up your book and start reading?
I would say pick up a Vanessa Riley book, because I'm going to take you on an adventure. I'm going to give you a saga, whether it is a romance or historical mystery or historical fiction. I'm going to take you someplace, and I do a lot of research to transform that moment of time that you have my book, so that you're standing from the comfort of your safe place. I'm taking you into a world that may be chaotic, that may be beautiful, that may be different. And I'm going to take you on a journey that you'll never forget. I love returning people. You're going to learn something in a Vanessa Riley book. Even in my romances, I take you on adventures of the advent of medicine and how it's changing, and how they fight different diseases. Yeah, that's the greatest thing you want in a romance, right? But in our present day world, we're dealing with people with, long-term chronic illnesses. Everything was pretty chronic back in the day because they had no cures. They had ideas and thoughts of how to get things better, and hopes and prayers. And sometimes it works and sometimes it didn't. But I take you on a journey, and everything I do, I try and make sure the research is solid, the prose are engaging, and that you have characters that you love to hate, love to see win, and we deal with the gray areas of history. I'm unapologetic in my approach to returning the true narrative of what was existing, what was happening, and who are the victors, and who are the ones who won by surviving another day.
Well put. Well, Vanessa, thank you so much. Congratulations on Fire, Sword, and Sea and everything you're working on. And I really enjoyed talking to you today.
Yeah, Colin, I love coming here. So thank you so much for having me, and hopefully we'll be back.